The crossbow bolt burned in Nira's shoulder as she watched the last transport vanish into the crimson sky. Blood, her blood, dripped between blue fingers, staining the frozen ground beneath her. Her own brother had fired the shot when she tried to board against the Council's decree. The Azuri evacuation ships grew smaller until they were nothing but specks among the stars, abandoning her to die. A violent tremor shook the ground. Terrasus was dying, its planetary core destabilizing more rapidly than even the Azuri scientists had predicted. That unstable core was why they were leaving, why everyone except Nira was leaving. "May the void take you all," she screamed into the empty air, her voice echoing across the barren landscape. Night was falling fast, the twin suns sinking below the jagged horizon. In the distance, the hunting cries of nocturnal predators echoed across the rocky terrain. Nira clutched her makeshift spear, a shard of metal bound to a broken branch, and limped toward a nearby outcropping for shelter. Gritting her teeth, Nira snapped off the fletched end of the bolt, leaving only the shaft protruding from both sides of her shoulder. With one swift movement, she pushed backward against a sharp edge of rock, driving the shaft until it broke through completely. The bolt clattered to the ground as fresh blood poured from the wound. The Azuri had abandoned her because of her genetic deficiency, cellular regeneration that worked at half the normal rate and a significantly shortened lifespan, making her a resource drain in their cold calculation. A distant roar sent a chill down her spine. Something big was hunting nearby. Then, cutting through the gathering darkness, a blinding light streaked across the sky, not the gentle pulse of a ship's engines, but the chaotic tumble of something falling, burning, crashing. The object struck the earth with a deafening impact less than a kilometer away. Curiosity overcame pain. Whatever had crashed might contain supplies, things that could keep her alive. With newfound determination, Nira pushed herself away from the rocks and began to limp toward the crash site. What she saw below made her forget her pain. Half buried in the soil was a vessel unlike any Azuri craft. Its design was angular, where Azuri ships were smooth and curved. Around it were, beings. They moved on two legs like Azuri, but their skin came in shades of brown, tan, and pink rather than blue. "Humans," Nira whispered. She had studied xenobiology extensively. Humans were known to the Azuri, a species from a distant system, encountered occasionally for trade or diplomacy. They were resourceful and adaptable, but also unpredictable. Dangerous, even. Now a group of them was stranded on Terrasus, just like her. As she watched, one of the humans, taller than the rest, with dark hair cropped close to the skull, moved among the others, giving orders. Under his direction, they pulled equipment and supplies from the wreckage, working with surprising efficiency despite their obvious injuries. Nira's instincts screamed at her to retreat, to hide, but a deeper part of her recognized the truth. Alone, she would die within days. These humans represented her only chance at survival. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out from behind the rocks and began to descend toward the crash site. Immediately, all activity ceased. Every human turned to stare at her. Several reached for weapons at their belts. The leader stepped forward, his hand resting on a blade sheathed at his hip. Nira stopped, raising her empty hand while keeping her spear lowered. "I mean no harm," she said in the common trade language. "This world is dangerous. Night brings predators. You need shelter." The dark-haired leader narrowed his eyes, studying her with intensity. "Who are you? What is this place?" "My name is Nira. I was of the Azuri. This is Terrasus. The planet is dying. Core destabilization. You need shelter before nightfall." "I know a place. I'm Commander Kane Reeves of the Earth Federation vessel Pathfinder. We were attacked by raiders and forced to make an emergency landing." His expression remained guarded, but some of the hostility had faded. "Why did they leave you behind?" "I was deemed expendable. A genetic mutation affects my cellular regeneration and shortens my lifespan. Resources were limited." She gestured to her wound. "I disagreed with their assessment." Before Reeves could respond, one of the humans called out an alarm. On the horizon, a massive wall of dust was approaching, a storm front moving with unnatural speed. "Dust storm," Nira said urgently. "Toxic. We need to find shelter now." Reeves made his decision quickly. "Lead the way." Nira turned and began limping back toward the ridge, pointing to a narrow canyon beyond. There are caves in those cliffs. A woman with copper-red hair approached Nira. I'm Dr. Maya Chen, ship's physician. That needs treatment before infection sets in. Later, Nira replied, watching the storm draw closer. If we survive. They reached the canyon just as the first winds hit, nearly knocking them off their feet. Inside the cave, the humans moved with practiced efficiency, setting up portable lights, checking for dangers, establishing a perimeter. Commander Reeves directed it all with a calm authority. Dr. Chen knelt beside Nira, opening her medical bag. That wound has to be treated now. Nira wanted to object, but darkness claimed her before she could form the words. She awoke to find herself lying on a makeshift bed near the back of the cave. Her shoulder was bandaged, the wound cleaned and treated. Across the cave, the humans had established a temporary camp. Beyond, Nira could hear the howling of the storm, still raging outside. Commander Reeves approached, crouching beside her. You're awake. Good. Thank you for treating my wound. Reeves nodded. We take care of those who help us. Now this planet, you said it's dying. How much time do we have? The Azuri scientists estimated total planetary collapse within 2 standard cycles. But the process is accelerating. We might have weeks, not months. And the seismic activity? Increasing in frequency and intensity. The quakes trigger atmospheric disturbances and awaken predators that normally remain dormant in the deeper caverns. As if on cue, a distant roar echoed through the canyon, causing several humans to reach for their weapons. What was that? Reeves asked. The Karax, a burrowing creature that hunts by sensing vibrations. The quakes drive them to the surface. Hostile? Extremely. Reeves absorbed this information with a grim nod. Our ship is damaged beyond immediate repair. Communications array is down. We need to find a way to contact our fleet for extraction. Nira considered this. The Azuri maintained a long-range communications relay on the northern continent. If it's still operational, you might be able to use it to send a distress signal. How far? 10 days' journey on foot across difficult terrain, and we'd have to cross Karax territory. Reeves stood, his expression resolute. We've faced worse odds. Once this storm passes, we'll salvage what we can from our ship and prepare for the journey. He paused. Will you guide us? Nira Tharon of the Azuri ships disappearing into the stars, of her brother's face as he fired the crossbow, of the years she'd spent cataloging Terrasis' flora and fauna, never suspecting her research would be deemed worthless when evacuation came. Yes, she said finally. I'll guide you, but understand this. Terrasis shows no mercy to the unprepared. Understood. Reeves extended his hand, a human gesture Nira recognized from her studies. We have a deal. The journey north began under twin suns that beat down mercilessly on the barren landscape. The storm had reshaped the terrain, erasing familiar landmarks and creating new obstacles. Nira led the way, using the position of the suns and the distant mountain range to maintain their course. They had salvaged what they could from the crashed ship: water purifiers, medical supplies, rations, portable shelters, and weapons. Each human carried a pack of essential gear. Despite her injury, Nira insisted on carrying her share. The first day passed without incident, though the going was slow across the broken ground. By nightfall, they had covered less distance than Nira had hoped, forcing them to make camp in a shallow depression that offered minimal protection. We need to move faster tomorrow, Reeves said as they gathered around the small heating unit. At this rate, we'll run out of supplies before reaching the relay. The terrain improves beyond the Ridge of Sorrows, Nira explained, using the Azuri name for the jagged formation visible on the horizon. But that's where Karax territory begins. How many of these creatures are we likely to encounter? They're solitary hunters, but territorial. We might encounter 3 or 4 distinct individuals if we cross directly through their hunting grounds. Can they be killed? Reeves asked bluntly. With difficulty, their exoskeletons are resistant to most weapons. Your blades might penetrate at the joints between armor plates, but you'd have to get dangerously close. So we avoid them if possible, Reeves concluded. Stealth over confrontation. As night fully descended, they established a watch rotation. Nira volunteered for the first shift, taking position on a small rise that offered a view of the surrounding terrain. The moons of Terrasis, Three pale orbs of varying sizes cast an eerie blue-green light across the landscape. She was joined by Levi, the young engineer. "So," he said after they had been watching in silence for some time, "why did your people really leave you behind? You don't seem expendable to me." "My genetic mutation affects more than just healing," she said finally. "It reduces my expected lifespan by nearly half. The council deemed me a poor investment. Why allocate resources to someone who won't live long enough to fully repay them?" The bitterness she'd been suppressing threatened to surface. "My own brother cast the deciding vote." Levi was quiet for a moment. "That's messed up," he said finally. "It was logical. The survival of the species outweighs—" "No, Baim," Levi interrupted. "It was cruel. Logic is just the excuse." She didn't know how to respond to that. The Azuri prided themselves on their rationality, their ability to make difficult decisions without emotional interference. She had tried to accept their judgment, even as she fought against it. "On Earth," Levi continued, "we learned the hard way what happens when you start deciding whose life has value. It never ends well." Before she could pursue this troubling line of thought, a faint tremor ran through the ground beneath them. "Quake?" Levi asked, tensing. Nira shook her head, rising to her feet. "No, something's moving underground. Wake the others." By the time Levi had alerted the camp, the tremors had intensified. Nira could feel them through her boots now, rhythmic, directional, approaching from the west. "Corax," she said as Reeves joined them. "A big one, moving fast." "How close?" "Too close. It's heading straight for us." The commander made a swift decision. "Everyone, grab essential gear only. We move now, due east. No lights, no noise." They had covered less than half a kilometer when the ground erupted behind them. Nira turned to see a nightmare rising from the earth, a massive creature with a segmented body covered in chitinous plates. 6 limbs ending in razor-sharp claws scrabbled at the ground as it pulled itself fully to the surface. Its head was a horror of sensory organs and mandibles, with dozens of vibration-detecting membranes that pulsed with an inner light. "Run!" Nira shouted, all thoughts of stealth abandoned. The Karax surged forward with terrifying speed. The humans scattered, drawing weapons as they ran. Reeves shouted orders, directing half the crew to circle left, while he led the rest right, a flanking maneuver. Behind them, chaos erupted. The Karax plunged into the center of the human formation, mandibles snapping at anything within reach. A scream cut through the night, one of the humans caught by a sweeping claw. Nira skidded to a halt, turning back in time to see Diaz, the woman who had distrusted her, pinned beneath one of the creature's limbs. Without thinking, Nira grabbed a blade from Kenji's belt and charged. "What are you doing?" Chen cried after her. Nira didn't answer. She raced toward the Karax, using her knowledge of its anatomy. With a running leap, she landed on its rear segment, driving the blade deep into the joint between 2 armor plates. The Karax shrieked, rearing up and thrashing wildly. Nira clung to the embedded blade, using it as an anchor as she climbed higher on the creature's back. From the corner of her eye, she saw Reeves and 3 others attacking the Karax's front limbs, trying to draw its attention away from Diaz. It worked. The creature swung toward them, momentarily releasing its grip on the fallen human. Nira seized her chance. She scrambled to the junction where the Karax's head connected to its body, the location of its central nerve cluster, according to her research. With all her strength, she drove the blade into the soft tissue there. The effect was immediate. The Karax convulsed violently, eventually crashing to the ground with a thunderous impact. Reeves was beside her, helping her down from the fallen monster. "That," he said with a hint of admiration, "was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen." "Is Diaz?" "Alive, thanks to you. Injured, but Chen thinks she'll make it." "You saved my life," Diaz said weakly as Nira approached. "Wait, after what I said." Nira knelt beside her. "Because it was right. Because on Terrasis, we survived together or not at all." Something shifted in Diaz's eyes. Respect, perhaps, or simply understanding. "We need to move," Reeves announced. "That commotion will attract every predator for kilometers." The next 3 days brought new challenges as they traversed the Ridge of Sorrows, a treacherous series of canyons and jagged peaks. Diaz's injury complicated matters. Though Chen had treated the wound, infection had set in, causing fever and weakness. On the fourth night, as they camped in the shelter of a massive stone arch, Chen approached Nira with concern in her eyes. Diaz's fever is getting worse. The antibiotics aren't working against whatever bacteria were on that creature's claws. I need something stronger. Nira thought for a moment. There's a plant that grows in these canyons. The Azuri called it bluestem. It has powerful antimicrobial properties. If we can find some, it might help. They found a small spring the next morning, tucked away in a hidden grotto, with clusters of bluestem growing around it. Chen harvested the plants, following Nira's instructions on which parts contained the strongest medicine. By midday, she had prepared a poultice for Diaz's wound and a bitter tea for her to drink. While Chen tended to Diaz, Reeves consulted with Nira about their progress. "We're here," Nira said, pointing to their position on a hand-drawn map. "The relay station is approximately 5 days' journey north, assuming we maintain our current pace." "And Diaz?" "The bluestem will help, but she needs rest to fully recover, something we can't afford to give her." Reeves considered this dilemma. What if we split up? A small group could move ahead at a faster pace, reach the relay and send for help. The rest could follow more slowly with Diaz. "Dangerous," Nira said immediately. "Smaller groups are more vulnerable to predators." "We'd have a better chance with you guiding us," Reeves acknowledged, "but every day we delay increases the risk for everyone. The planet's not getting any more stable." Reeves made his decision. "We leave at first light tomorrow. 4 of us, you, me, Kenji for communications, and Levi for technical support. The rest follow with Diaz as quickly as they can." The next morning, they divided supplies and said their goodbyes. Torres took command of the larger group, with Chen staying to care for Diaz. They would follow as quickly as possible, using the path Nira and the advance team blazed. The smaller group, Nira, Reeves, Kenji, and Levi, moved out at first light, traveling light and fast across the increasingly unstable terrain. Without Diaz slowing them down, they covered twice the distance they had managed previously. By midday, they had cleared the Ridge of Sorrows and entered a vast plain dotted with strange, twisted formations that Nira called stone gardens, the result of ancient lava flows shaped by millennia of wind erosion. "We're making good time," Reeves observed as they paused briefly to eat and check their bearings. "At this rate, we could reach the relay in 3 days instead of 5. "If the weather holds," Nira cautioned, eyeing the horizon where dark clouds were gathering. Terraces' storms are growing more frequent and severe as the atmosphere deteriorates. The first drops of acid rain began to fall as they reached a cluster of stone formations. The humans pulled protective coverings from their packs, hastily erecting a small shelter between 2 of the larger stones. They huddled inside as the storm intensified, listening to the hiss and pop of acid rain striking the protective material above them. "How long do these storms typically last?" Reeves asked, his voice raised to be heard over the howling wind. "A few hours, sometimes a full day," Nira replied. "But nothing is typical anymore. The planet's systems are breaking down." As the day wore on, the storm showed no signs of abating. By nightfall, they were forced to abandon their position as floodwaters began to rise around the stone formation. In the darkness, they struggled to higher ground. Nira led them to a massive stone pillar with a hollow center, a formation the Azuri had called Sky Fingers. Inside, they found dry ground and enough space to stretch out, though the howling of the wind through the stone created an eerie, almost mournful sound. "This storm isn't natural," Nira said as they settled in for the night. "The intensity, the toxicity, it's a symptom of Terraces' death throes." "How much worse will it get?" Reeves asked. The Azuri models predicted increasing atmospheric instability, leading to superstorms capable of stripping the surface bare. Eventually, the core destabilization will trigger massive tectonic shifts, volcanic eruptions, and possibly a partial planetary collapse. "Sounds like we're on a timer," Levi said. "We've always been on a timer," Reeves replied. "Now it's just ticking louder." Nira found herself sharing a watch with Reeves in the early hours of the morning, both of them watching lightning illuminate the flooded plain below. "You never told me why the raiders attacked your ship," Nira said after a comfortable silence. "What were they after?" When Reeves finally spoke, his voice was low, almost lost beneath the sound of the storm. "The Pathfinder was on a classified mission. We were transporting something called the Genesis Protocol, Federation technology capable of accelerating planetary terraforming. Nara turned to him in surprise. You can transform worlds, make them habitable? In theory, the technology is experimental, but eventually it could take a world like Terrasus, before the core destabilization, and make it suitable for human colonization in decades rather than centuries. And the Raiders wanted this technology. Reeves nodded. They were well-informed, well-equipped. They knew exactly when and where to hit us. We suspect inside information, possibly a leak within the Federation. By dawn, the storm had finally begun to subside, though the land below their shelter was transformed. Scoured by acid rain, flooded in the lower areas, with many of the smaller stone formations partially dissolved or collapsed. The next 2 days brought a grueling march across increasingly hostile terrain. The storm had changed the landscape, creating new hazards and obliterating familiar landmarks. Nira was forced to rely on the position of the suns and the distant mountain range to maintain their northward course. On the third day, as they crested a final ridge, Nira felt a surge of relief. In the valley below, partially obscured by mist, stood a massive structure, the Azuri relay station. There it is, she said, pointing. We made it. Reeves studied the facility through a small optical enhancer. Looks intact. Any idea if it's still operational? The Azuri built to last. If the power core is intact, it should still function. As they drew closer to the relay station, Nira felt a growing sense of unease. Something was wrong. The facility appeared undamaged, but the main entrance stood open, an impossibility if the automated systems were functioning correctly. Wait, she said, halting the group 100 meters from the entrance. Something's not right. The door should be sealed. Reeves signaled for everyone to take cover behind a fallen support pillar. Could animals have gotten in, damaged the controls? Possible, but unlikely. The outer doors are reinforced to withstand even Karak's attacks. Could your people have returned for something? Levi suggested. Nira shook her head. They took everything of value during the evacuation. There was nothing left worth coming back for. Except the relay itself, Kenji pointed out. If someone else wanted to use it. Reeves made a decision. We proceed with caution. Weapons ready, stay alert. Nira, you know the layout. You lead, I'll cover. They approached the entrance slowly. The massive doors hung askew as if forced open by tremendous strength. Inside, emergency lights cast a dim blue glow across a debris-strewn atrium. Main control room? Reeves whispered. Upper level, Nira replied, pointing to a curved stairway. But we should check the power core first. Lower level. If it's damaged, the relay won't function regardless of what we do upstairs. The power core level was in better condition than the atrium. Less accessible, therefore less damaged. Nira moved through the maze of equipment, heading toward a sealed door marked with Azuri warning symbols. The core chamber, she explained. If it's intact, we should be able to restore full power to the communications array. The door required a security code, one of the few things Nira had memorized before the evacuation. After a heart-stopping pause, the door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a chamber dominated by a glowing cylindrical structure, the antimatter containment core that powered the entire facility. It's still operational, Nira breathed, relief washing over her. Low power mode, but functional. Levi moved to a control panel, his fingers dancing across the alien interface as Nira translated the symbols for him. Within an hour, they had increased the core output to 50%, enough to power the relay. Now for the control room, Nira said, leading them back to the maintenance shaft. As they climbed to the upper levels, a low rumble shook the facility. Dust rained down from above, and the ladder swayed alarmingly. Quake? Levi asked, gripping the rungs tightly. Too localized, Reeves replied. Something else. They emerged into a corridor on the upper level just as another tremor hit, stronger than the first. This time it was accompanied by a sound Nira recognized all too well, the high-pitched shriek of a Karax. We're not alone, she warned, drawing her blood out. The main control chamber was a circular room with a domed ceiling, ringed by workstations and dominated by a central holographic display. Like the atrium, it showed signs of deliberate damage, smashed equipment, torn out wiring, shattered displays. Kenji was already examining the main communications console. The primary array is damaged, but the backup system appears intact. If I can reroute through the auxiliary processors. He trailed off, focused on his work. Another tremor shook the room, stronger than before. From somewhere below came the unmistakable sound of metal tearing. Whatever's down there is getting closer, Levi warned. We need to hurry. Almost ready, Kenji muttered. Need a few more minutes. Reeves made a swift decision. Levi, stay with Kenji. Help him any way you can. Neera and I will check the disturbance. Buy you some time. She followed Reeves back into the corridor, both of them moving silently toward the source of the disturbance. As they descended to the middle level of the facility, the tremors increased in frequency and intensity. They entered what had once been a research laboratory, now a scene of utter destruction. In the center of the room, a Karax unlike any Neera had seen before was tearing through the floor. Its massive claws ripped through metal and composite materials with terrifying ease. But this was no ordinary Karax. Its exoskeleton was augmented with metal plating, and various mechanical components had been grafted onto its body. Most disturbing were its sensory organs, which had been replaced with glowing red devices that pulsed with artificial light. What is that thing? Reeves breathed. A Karax, Neera replied, but modified, cybernetically enhanced. She stared in horror at the abomination. The Azuri would never do this. It violates all our ethical principles. The creature's head swiveled toward them, its artificial sensors locking onto their position. It let out a deafening shriek and lunged forward with impossible speed. Reeves shoved Neera aside just as one massive claw slammed into the spot where they had been standing. They rolled in opposite directions, coming up with weapons ready as the cybernetic Karax oriented itself for another attack. The joints, Neera called. Target the joints between the armor plates. As the creature charged Reeves, he ducked beneath a sweeping claw and drove his blade into the exposed tissue at its leg joint. The Karax screamed, more enraged than pain, and whipped around with devastating force. Neera seized the opportunity to attack from behind, leaping onto its back as she had done with the previous Karax. But this one was different, faster, stronger, and seemingly aware of her tactics. Before she could drive her blade home, it bucked violently, throwing her against a wall. Pain exploded through her body as she collided with unyielding metal. She slumped to the floor, vision blurring. Through the haze, she saw Reeves continuing the fight, dodging and striking with precision that spoke of extensive combat training. But the cybernetic Karax was too strong, too fast. It backed him into a corner, massive form blocking any escape. Neera forced herself to her feet, ignoring the pain that lanced through her ribs. She grabbed a length of metal piping from the debris around her and charged, letting out a battle cry that would have made an Azuri warrior proud. The distraction worked. The Karax turned toward her, giving Reeves the opening he needed. He drove his blade deep into the creature's side, finding a gap in its armored plates. The Karax roared, thrashing wildly. Its tail whipped around, catching Reeves across the chest and sending him flying. He struck the far wall and crumpled to the floor, unmoving. No, Neera screamed. She faced the wounded creature alone now, her makeshift weapon seeming pathetically inadequate against its cybernetic might. Her gaze fell on the glowing red sensors that had replaced the creature's natural organs. They pulsed rhythmically, tracking her movements with unnatural precision. If those were damaged. Neera feinted left, then dove right as the Karax lunged. She rolled beneath its massive body, coming up directly beneath its head. With all her strength, she drove the metal pipe upward into one of the glowing sensors. The effect was spectacular. The sensor exploded in a shower of sparks, and the Karax went berserk, thrashing blindly, unable to track her position accurately with half its sensory array destroyed. Neera retreated, working her way around to where Reeves lay. He was conscious but dazed, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "Can you stand?" she asked urgently, helping him to a sitting position. "I think so," he grunted. "Nice work with that thing's eye." Supporting each other, they staggered toward the exit. Behind them, the cybernetic Karax was regaining its equilibrium, adjusting to the loss of half its sensors. Its roar of rage followed them as they fled down the corridor. They reached the control room to find Kenji working frantically at the communications console while Levi stood guard at the door. "The message is ready to transmit," Kenji reported, "but I need a few more minutes to boost the signal strength enough to reach the fleet." "You don't have a few minutes," Nira said. "That thing will be here any second." As if on cue, a tremendous crash echoed from the corridor outside. The cybernetic Carax was tearing through the facility, following their trail. "Seal the doors," Reeves ordered. "Barricade them with anything you can find." They worked frantically, dragging broken equipment and furniture to block the entrance. It wouldn't hold the creature for long, but perhaps long enough for Kenji to complete the transmission. "Almost there," Kenji muttered, fingers flying across the controls. Signal strength at 80% and climbing. The first impact against the sealed doors made them all jump. Metal groaned as tremendous force was applied from the other side. The second impact dented the doors inward. The third tore them partially from their tracks. "Transmitting now," Kenji announced, activating the final sequence. The control room filled with a high-pitched whine as the relay powered up to full capacity, sending their distress call into space. The cybernetic Carax shrieked in response, the sound nearly drowning out the transmission. "Message sent," Kenji confirmed. With a final surge of strength, the Carax broke through the barricade, sending them scrambling for safety. It charged into the control room, destroying everything in its path. "The auxiliary controls," Nira shouted, pointing to a smaller chamber adjoining the main room. "We can seal ourselves in." They ran for the doorway, the Carax close behind. Reeves pushed Nira through first, followed by Kenji and Levi. As the commander himself dove through, the creature's claw caught his leg, dragging him back. Without hesitation, Nira grabbed Reeves's arms, pulling with all her strength. Levi and Kenji joined her, and together they yanked the commander free, just as Levi slammed his hand on the emergency seal control. The reinforced door slid shut, separating them from the rampaging Carax. Outside, they could hear it shrieking and clawing at the barrier. "Is everyone all right?" Nira asked, looking around at the battered group. Reeves was examining a deep gash in his leg where the Carax had caught him. "I'll live," he grunted. "Did the transmission go through?" Kenji nodded. "Signal was at full strength. If there are any Federation ships within range, they'll receive it." As if sensing their thoughts, a new sound reached them. A deep, resonant thrum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The floor beneath them trembled, not from the Carax's attacks, but from something far more ominous. "The planet," Nira whispered. "It's accelerating. The final phase has begun." Through a small viewport in the auxiliary control room, they could see the sky outside changing color, from pale blue to an angry red shot through with flashes of lightning. The tremors increased in frequency and intensity. "What exactly happens in this final phase?" Levi asked, his voice tight with suppressed fear. "Massive tectonic shifts," Nira explained. "The planetary core becomes completely unstable, triggering continent-wide earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and eventually, planetary fragmentation. Terrasis will literally tear itself apart." Hours passed in tense silence. The tremors continued, growing more frequent. Outside, the Carax had fallen silent, though occasional scratching sounds suggested it remained nearby, waiting. Kenji monitored the communications array, hoping for a response to their distress signal. Nira found herself drawn to the viewport, watching as Terrasis entered its death throes. It was simultaneously terrifying and beautiful, the end of a world she had studied all her life. "I'm getting something, a transmission on Federation frequencies," Kenji suddenly announced. "Pathfinder crew, this is Federation vessel Dauntless, responding to your distress call. Commander Reeves, do you copy?" Reeves leaned toward the console. "This is Commander Reeves. We read you, Dauntless. Our situation is critical. Planet is in terminal phase collapse, and we have hostiles in the immediate vicinity." "Understood, Commander. We're in orbit now, preparing shuttle extraction. ETA to your location, 30 minutes. A violent tremor, the strongest yet, interrupted their thoughts. The entire room seemed to shift, tilting several degrees to one side. Outside, the sounds of collapsing infrastructure echoed through the facility. "The foundation is giving way," Levi warned. "This whole place could go down at any moment." "We need a plan B," Reeves had said grimly. If that door fails before extraction arrives. Nira studied the small room, noting a maintenance access in the ceiling. There, she pointed. Emergency exit to the roof. If we can reach it, we might be able to hold out until the shuttle arrives. Levi quickly stacked equipment to create a makeshift ladder, while Kenji gathered the essential communications gear they would need to maintain contact with the Dauntless. Outside, the Karax's attacks intensified, as if it sensed their intentions. The door began to buckle inward. With a final wrench, Levi got the hatch open. They climbed quickly, emerging onto the roof of the relay station, just as the room below finally gave way. The scene that greeted them was apocalyptic. The sky had darkened to near night, split by continuous lightning. The ground heaved and buckled like a living thing, and in the distance, plumes of fire erupted from newly formed fissures in the earth. They had barely reached shelter when a tremendous crash came from behind them. The cybernetic Karax burst through the roof access, its mechanical sensors glowing malevolently in the unnatural darkness. "Form a perimeter," Reeves ordered Ade, drawing his blade. "Back to back." They arranged themselves in a tight circle, weapons ready as the creature advanced. It moved more cautiously now, seeming to assess them with an intelligence that no natural Karax would possess. The Karax charged. On the open roof, they had more room to maneuver than in the confined spaces below, but the constant tremors made footing treacherous. Another tremor, more violent than any before, shook the entire facility. The roof began to split apart, a jagged fissure opening between them. Nira and Levi found themselves separated from Reeves and Kenji, with the Karax between the two groups. "Jump," Reeves called to them, "before the gap gets too wide." Levi went first, his injured state making the leap awkward but successful. Nira prepared to follow, but as she tensed for the jump, the cybernetic Karax turned toward her, sensing an opportunity. It charged, mechanical limbs propelling it forward with inhuman speed. Nira knew she couldn't make the jump in moment. Instead, she turned to face the creature, blade ready for one final stand. "Nira!" Reeves shouted. "No!" The Karax lunged, jaws open to reveal serrated mandibles. Nira dodged at the last possible moment, using the creature's momentum against it. As it passed, she drove her blade deep into its underside, where the natural armor was thinnest. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Karax convulsed violently, its mechanical systems shorting out as her blade severed some critical component. It careened forward, unable to stop, and plunged into the widening fissure in the roof. Nira had no time to celebrate. The gap between her and the others was now too wide to jump. The section of roof she stood on was tilting precariously. "Nira!" Reeves called again, his face a mask of anguish. "Hold on. We'll find a way to reach you." But they both knew there was no way across. Not anymore. The facility was coming apart too quickly. "Go!" Nira shouted back. "Get to the extraction point. I'll find another way." She didn't wait for his response, already turning to look for an alternate route off the collapsing roof. There, a maintenance ladder on the far side leading down to what might have been a landing pad. If she could reach it. A new sound cut through the chaos, the distinctive whine of engines. Through the toxic clouds above, a sleek vessel descended. The Federation shuttle. It hovered near the section where Reeves, Kenji, and Levi stood, a hatch opening on its side. Nira could see figures inside, ready to assist with the extraction. "No!" Reeves was shouting into his communicator, pointing toward Nira. "There's one more! We need to reach her!" The shuttle pilot seemed to understand. The vessel adjusted position, trying to maneuver closer to Nira's isolated section of roof. But another violent tremor shook the facility, and Nira felt the structure beneath her feet begin to give way completely. There was no time left, no options. She locked eyes with Reeves across the widening room and smiled, a genuine expression of acceptance. "Go," she called again. "I'll be fine." It was a lie, and they both knew it, but it was a necessary one. With a final anguished look, Reeves allowed Kenji and Levi to pull him into the shuttle. As the vessel began to rise, Nira turned her attention to survival. The section of roof she stood on was seconds away from total failure. The maintenance ladder was her only hope, however slim. She ran, jumping over widening cracks, maintaining her balance as the structure shifted beneath her. Reaching the ladder, she swung onto it just as the roof finally gave way completely, collapsing inward with a thunderous roar. The ladder attached to the outer wall of the facility remained intact, for now. Nira descended as quickly as she dared, reaching the landing pad just as another tremor shook the entire structure. A movement in the sky caught her attention. The shuttle was returning, descending once more through the toxic clouds. The vessel hovered above the landing pad, buffeted by the increasingly violent winds. The side hatch opened, and Nira could see Reeves there, secured by a safety line, reaching out toward her. "Jump!" His voice carried faintly through the storm. "I'll catch you." The shuttle couldn't land. The pad was too unstable, but it had maneuvered as close as possible, perhaps 2 meters above the surface. Nira backed up as far as she dared, took a deep breath of the poisonous air, and ran. At the edge of the platform, she leapt with every ounce of strength her Azuri body possessed. For one terrifying moment, she was suspended in chaos. Toxic wind tearing at her, lightning splitting the sky around her, the ground below beginning to open into a massive fissure. Then strong hands grasped her arms, pulling her upward into the shuttle. She collapsed onto the floor of the vessel, gasping for breath. Through watering eyes, she saw Reeves kneeling beside her, his face a mixture of relief and concern. "I told you to go," she managed between coughs. "And I told you before," he replied, helping her to a seat as the shuttle began its ascent. "We don't leave our people behind." Our people. The simple phrase affected Nira more deeply than she would have expected. After a lifetime of being measured and found wanting by her own kind, to be claimed so matter-of-factly by these humans was overwhelming. As the shuttle broke through the upper atmosphere, leaving the dying world behind, Nira looked out a viewport at Terra C's one last time. From orbit, the planet's death throes were even more spectacular. Continent-sized cracks glowing with the heat of exposed mantle, the very shape of the world beginning to distort as gravitational forces failed to contain the chaos beneath the surface. "The others?" she asked, turning to Reeves. "Torres? Chen? Diaz?" "Safe," he assured her. "The second shuttle picked them up before the tremors got too bad. They're already aboard the Dauntless." Relief washed over her. "And the Genesis protocol?" "Your mission?" Reeves smiled slightly. "Secure. Once we're aboard the Dauntless, we'll resume course to the research station where it's meant to be delivered." He paused, studying her face. "You're welcome to join us, all the way to Earth, if you want." Nira looked around the shuttle at the humans who had risked everything to save her. In their faces, she saw not calculation of her worth, but simple acceptance. "I would like that," she said finally. "I think I have much to learn from your people." "And we from you," Ravers replied. "Your knowledge, your courage. The Federation could use someone like you." As the shuttle docked with the waiting Dauntless, Nira felt a strange sense of peace. She had lost her home, her people, everything she had ever known. But perhaps she had found something more valuable, a place where she was wanted not for what she could contribute, but simply for who she was. Behind them, visible through the viewport, Teresa's gave one final cataclysmic shudder. The planet's surface ruptured completely, releasing the pent-up energy of its destabilized core in a brilliant flash that momentarily outshone the system's stars. When the light faded where a planet had once been, there was now only a scattered field of debris. Nira whispered a traditional Azuri farewell to the shattered world that had been her home, then turned away from the viewport to face her future among the stars.